What's up ProGuides family, it's time for another video. Since the latest patch was only a minor one, it's still something that affects tier lists for champions. Not only that, but also the overall changes to the meta, new builds or just players pioneering new ways of playing a champion set the stage for new rising stars in those lists. So be ready, cause for today we have a combined tier list for the higher and lower ELO, just for you. So let's start off with one of the champions that has been nerfed as of recently, Dr. Mundo. He is in the A tier for the Baron list. The reason for that are the recent changes for him. With the release of 2.4D, his base health regen got up from 0.81 to 1.07, which basically means on level 15 he has 3 increased health regen. However, now we come to the nerf part. His first ability's maximum damage to monsters got reduced in the early stages of the game by more than half. Previously it dealt 270 damage and now it's down to 125 on the first ability's rank. The next thing he lost is a little bit of healing on his ultimate ability. Previously healing for 60% on level 1, it now heals only for 50%. Across the board it got nerfed by 10%, which is quite the meaningful change for a champion that regenerates life so frequently, because as the game goes on, his ultimate cooldown gets relatively low thanks to the item he's building. So even though it's not the meaningful nerf for the Baron laner Mundo, it's still a hard nerf for the jungle Mundo. The reason for that is rather simple. The more time you have to spend clearing your camps, the less time you can actively look for ganks, or you might be in an unfavorable position because, yet again, you are too slow. And in terms of jungling, everything is based around opportunities. The more you get, the more likely you are to cash out. So take a look at our Baron list for the lower ELO. And before we move on to the next lane, we are now going to our question of the day. On what device are you playing Wild Rift, and what frequent issues are you encountering while doing so? Be it FPS drops, overheating issues, basically anything you can think of. And whatever it is, leave it in the comment section below. So next up comes the jungle for the lower ELO tier list, and here we have Wukong on the S tier. He's just a reliable super pick that always performs well regardless of what you're doing. So keep in mind, whenever you're picking this champion, you have the ability of either going full tank, more like a bruiser, or even full assassin. It's all up to your fantasy. But if you want the most consistent and best build, it's most of the time the more tanky oriented Wukong. He just doesn't die thanks to his healing on the first ability scaling with his health. However, just the healing isn't the best part about Wukong. It's more about his ability to engage and CC the enemy. And he can not only do this once, but twice. And while doing so, his team gets plenty of opportunities to capitalize on in order to win the fight. And this is our full tier list for the jungle in the lower ELO. Next up comes the middle lane, and here we have Corki in the A tier. He's just a very consistent pick that always performs whatever you do. You can basically slap either the Essence Reaver, Charge Blade build on him, or you can go for the Mana Mune build, which means you'll never run out of mana. I personally dislike the Essence Reaver build because you're running out of mana so fast. So without a blue buff, especially in solo queue, you just can't do too much. But both builds, as long as you don't run out of mana, really hurt a lot. A fully scaled Corki with a Mana Mune isn't something you joke about. And this is our full tier list for the middle lane. Now let's move on to the AD carries. Even though Senna hasn't been played in the AD carry position, which basically means she's farming, but more in the support role, Riot still decided to nerf the spawn rate for her killing minions. So with the newest patch, the mist rate spawn rate has been lowered from 7 to 3%. If we're honest, that doesn't really matter because I haven't seen a Senna farming minions in quite a while. If anything, you see a Senna as a support with somebody that farms. Everything else is just weak, at least in direct comparison. So for this list, she gets only placed in the B tier for the AD carries. Senna as a champion just gains way too much by not being the one that farms the minions. So I don't know what this nerf is trying to accomplish, but it's surely not a way of nerfing her. It might be a placebo nerf to convince people she has been nerfed, but it's most definitely not directly impacting her in any levels of elite play. So to all the Senna enjoyers out there, you can still play this champion all day if you play with the right characters in the lane. So go find a duo queue mate and queue it up with any constellation of champions in the Dragon lane. Even with the Singed, you can have a lot of fun with the Senna, so let's go for it. And this is our entire AD carry list for the lower ELO. Last but not least, for the lower ELO tier list we have the supports, and for those we have Blitzcrank. So what does Blitzcrank do? Well, the only thing Blitzcrank is infamous for is throwing his hook ability. Once this hook ability is down, there's not much this guy has to offer. He's a melee champion, so he needs to get into your face to get something done, and if he misses his hook, well, it's kinda hard for him to run in your direction, because even if he reaches you, he's most likely dead before he actually does so. So let's quickly talk about what has been changed. His second ability, called Overdrive, has been buffed. The mana cost has been lowered from 75 to 50, and the movement speed bonus have been increased by 5 per level. So on level 1, it's now a 70 to 75% bonus, and on the highest level it's an 85 to 90% bonus. It's quite a nice buff, but what realistically does it change? Not too much. He'll still suffer from the same problems unless they change something with this kit. For example, on the League PC version, his ultimate ability removes all shielding, which is quite nice if you consider how Locket and such things work in this game. Or maybe even Starak, especially with Gargoyle, because then you can't kill people, but with this then, this champion might actually become valuable in specific draft. And this is our entire tier list for the supports in the lower ELO bracket. So let's move on to the high ELO tier list. Let's start with the Baron lane yet again. In the A tier we have the Gragas. Previously in the Baron lane, Gragas was played as a tank. However, he has received quite a few nerfs over time and therefore dropped out of priority. He's simply not a champion anymore that is played in that lane. He's way better in the middle lane and he's 10 times better in the support role. So whoever mains Gragas out there, please reconsider your pick on this lane. Rather play somewhere else and have some more fun, especially if you're going AP, because then you can one-shot carries and smile. However, this doesn't mean he's unplayable in that lane, he's just not as good anymore. So if you really want to play him there, you can still do so, but always keep in mind, your champion isn't as dominant anymore as he used to be. So especially if you engage in trading, you'll definitely feel the difference. And this is our full Baron tier list for the higher ELO. Next up comes the jungle role. For this we have Ranga. Ranga has been the recipient of a few nerfs that targeted his base AD. First his scaling base AD and now his flat AD on level 1, which basically means he has gotten quite weaker in direct comparison. But unironically speaking, Ranga's primary job isn't only to kill champions in the game. He wants to kill 5 if possible to get his passive stacks, but after that his best job is actually split pushing. He sees a teamfight which he doesn't want to participate in and he just goes pushing. After like 15 to 20 seconds, and if nobody interrupts what he's doing, he'll take away 2 towers at least. And if you give him too much time, he'll end the game before you even notice what has happened. In my more recent games, I've seen some crazy Rangas do some insane stuff when it comes to pushing. They basically wait in a rush to see more than enough people on the map to then just continue and push. They just do the same thing over and over again. And the reason why it works is because people don't pay enough attention to waves. The moment you see a wave and the wave coming into your tower, you best believe that if the enemy team has a good Ranga, there's a high chance that this guy is gonna be there and he will take your tower. But that's not all. He also forces you to be very aware of any brush you're getting close to. Because in theory, he might sit in that one, and if you face check him, you are the one that's going to die, because this guy still deals a lot of burst damage even though he has been nerfed quite hard. And this is our full tier list for the higher ELO jungle. Now let's move on to the mid lane, and for the mid lane we have Zed in the S tier. So let's briefly speak about assassins first. In a solo queue environment you can technically put any assassin in the S tier. The reason is, people pay way too little attention to what they're doing. If they vanish into fog or war, they basically forget that they ever existed. And the worst thing they could ever do is just blindly following them. Because think about the Ranga thing, they might just wait in a rush to just one-shot. However, let's talk about Zed here. According to Riot Games, Zed is overperforming even when he doesn't land his shurikens. So as a consequence, they're cutting down on his consistent damage in order to make Zed's success more about landing the right spells at the right time. So to make him a little bit weaker, his third ability's damage has been decreased by 10% of the bonus AD scaling, and its flat damage got reduced as well. On the highest level of the ability, he loses 15 flat damage, which on top of the 10% scaling might hurt him quite a bit, but if you consider who he's actually trying to kill, as in AD carries or squishy champions, they'll die anyway. So this nerf is not gonna kill Zed, it's just going to be a nuisance to him. So don't worry about it, it's not gonna change the world, because the only thing that changes the world for Zed is when the enemy team buys a stasis enchant. It's the worst thing that can happen to you, so always check the inventories before you engage. You don't want to engage onto a target with the stasis, because then your ultimate ability is lost, and you might get punished for that. So rather stay on your toes and be aware. And this is our tier list for the middle lane. Next up are the AD carries, and for this we have Xayah in the S tier. According to Riot's data, Xayah has been struggling in the recent patches. Specifically, the nerfs to her Khan and the scaling on his third ability made her quite weak. The reason for that is because she was such a good synergistic pick with the Rakan. It was just overbearing, especially if the Rakan went into ability power. So as a consequence, they're giving her a bit more AD per level to bolster her damage throughout the game. This means the attack damage per level goes up from 2.65 to 3.6, which means on level 15 she gets 13 AD extra on top. It is basically a little bit more than a longsword in terms of AD, so it's up to 500 gold in terms of a direct buff. Ultimately speaking, it's still a nice buff, but it doesn't deal with the problems. Xayah is just not a champion you can blind pick. She's a champion you want to take against teams that want to engage into you. Basically, a full engage comp you're fighting into is the best for a Xayah, because the Xayah wants to kite back and use her feathers to lock down the enemy champions and demolish them with her damage. On the flip side though, the more range is involved and the more mages that have high range are involved, the less of a good time it is for the Xayah. She just can't play in those scenarios, because running into the enemy team is something this champion doesn't like at all. And this is our full AD carry tier list. Last but not least comes the support role, and for this we have Thresh in the S tier for the higher ELO. Riot has been closely monitoring Thresh due to his high skill cap gameplay, so as a consequence he has been cautiously buffed over time. However, he is still underperforming below their expectations. Therefore, Riot is giving him a little bit more reason to collect some extra souls. With this patch, his passive damage on his third ability goes up from 1 to 2 soul he is collected. But let me tell you one thing about Thresh. If you like to make plays and think support is boring, pick up this champion and see for yourself what it really means to have some fun on this champion. It's crazy how much you can do. You can save people with your lantern, you can cancel so many spells with your third ability, and you can go for some nice flash hooks. And the most crazy part about this champion is his lane. If his third ability is fully stacked up, he will literally slap you to death on level 1. And if you don't pay attention, he flashes into your face, flays you into the enemy AD carry, and, well, you lost lane. And then you get flamed by your team. And this is our full list for the support in higher ELO. And with that, we are basically done for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you tomorrow.